tremendous turnout. We have been doing this now for multiple years, and this is our third time having Elliot back with us, and I think everybody has been very intrigued by Elliot's presentations in the past, and obviously the continual turnout continues to climb, so nice job, Elliot, nice job. Who are first-timers today for Elliot's presentation? Wow, outstanding. Well, you're in for a real treat. His company is known as Laughs and Graphs. And so anybody that can take a topic of national economy and politics and bring a sense of humor to it, but also drives real pertinent points home. Elliot does a fantastic job at that, hence the reason why we brought him back. And he also gets rave reviews by the people that have heard him. So for you that have been here before, I think you'll enjoy it again. For first-timers, you're in for a big treat. So I've got a brief bio of Elliot's that I'm going to read so I don't mess it up, but as you'll be able to tell, he's quite acclaimed with his career. He has a PhD, which is a nationally acclaimed economist and public speaker specializing in making the minutiae of economics fun, relevant, and educational. He earned his BA in economics with a first-class honors from McGill University in Montreal, as well as a master's and PhD in public administration from Syracuse. Eisenberg is also the former senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders of Washington, D.C. He's the author of more than 85 articles and serves on the expert advisory board of the Mortgage Market Guide. He has been invited to testify before lawmakers and is often asked to comment on proposed legislation. His research and opinions have been featured in Bloomberg, Businessweek, Bureau of National Affairs, Forbes, Fortune, and many other publications. Dr. Eisenberg is the chief economist of Graphs and Laughs LLC, an economic consulting firm that serves a variety of clients across the United States. He writes a syndicated column and authors a daily 70-word commentary on the economy. I'm going to pause there because he truly does. Every day. The only day he takes off is, I think, holidays and maybe weekends. So he writes a blog, in essence, a 70 words, not 69, not 71, 70 words on the state of the economy every day. And he might even, he'll have his contact information up here if you want to be a part of that. I think in here, over 10,000 people, I think, are now affiliated with getting Elliot's information. So pretty neat. Last but not least, Elliot has visited 49 of 50 states. Does anybody remember what the one state that he hasn't visited? Maybe he'll share it with you because I can't remember either. His interests includes keeping the rate of restoration of a 60-year-old house ahead of the rate of deterioration. He loves ice hockey and talking economics to crowds large and small. So with that, please welcome Elliot.
What an incredibly warm welcome. I don't know how to, I should just stop and leave right now. I think we're done. The peak is over. What do I say? But first, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be back. This is our third time. It's like family now, right? This is like I really have to tell you the truth now. I can't lie. I think it's a one and done. I have history now. So where do I begin? A year ago I was here, we talked, it was just after Trump had won the election. And there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty, I guess there still is, as to what's going to happen. And last year I left you with a way to think about Trump that I think has served us pretty well. I said there were three Trumps. There was going to be the good Trump, that was going to do tax cuts, a certain type, with supply side cuts and get productivity up and do those sorts of good things. There'd be a neutral Trump, a small tax cut like we're kind of going to get, I think. And then there was the bad Trump who'd throw out 12 million immigrants and rip up trade deals and so on. And I think the jury's still out. Which Trump has showed up? It's been largely no Trump, with the exception of a lot of deregulation. He's done a lot on the deregulatory side. And those are things that economists are generally enthusiastic about. There'll be some deregulation for banks coming up, so you'll probably be having a little bit less burden and so on and so forth. Businesses will have a little bit less and so on. Those are generally good things, but nothing remarkable. But let's go on. We'll talk about Trump as we go a lot, as you can imagine. And the first slide here, I think, tells you, look, it's a little better. 18 is going to be better. There are a whole bunch of reasons why, and I'll explain them in some good details. But sit back and relax and enjoy this, because this is going to be a decent year. Of course, we'll go to hell next week. I'll look stupid, but whatever. When we're all enthusiastic, that's when you know we're going to hell in a handbasket. Yeah. So, this is GDP, right? GDP is 4 basic terms. It's household consumption, C, corporate investment, I, government spending, G, and net exports. And I'll use these symbols as we go through to remind us of what's going on. And the key thing really here is I. C is fine. It's almost 70% of GDP. It'll continue doing fine. A little weaker, we'll explain, but it's fine. I's getting better. Corporate investment in equipment really is taking off. Wall Street's now giving shareholder boosts to firms that invest in equipment. Plant also. But this is good. It's going to help GDP growth. It's going to help labor productivity growth. This is going to be, I think, the major driver of our economy going forward. G, we're going to talk about tax cuts. There'll be a lot to talk about in tax cuts. The last term is exports minus imports. It's not terribly important, but it'll be a little bit of a boost as the dollar weakens slowly a little bit. So I is the major story here. G may help us a little bit with the tax cut, but less than we think, and I'll explain why. Let's begin. So why do I feel good about C? C is being driven by wealth, right? You have more money, higher income, higher wages, higher wealth. These push consumption. You spend money. And the stock market's at an all-time high. It breaks records all the time. This is terrific. And net wealth is at an all-time high. It's up $40 trillion from the trough here in 2008-9. The great vertical bars are recession bars. So that's doing terrifically well. You'd think with that kind of increase in wealth, spending would be spectacular. $40 trillion in 8 or 9 years, almost a doubling of our wealth in a short period of time. It hasn't worked out. It's been okay. C's been fine, but C hasn't been particularly good. C was better 10 years ago than it is today, despite this rapid increase in wealth. In part, it's because we're older, we're more conservative as Americans, because the average age has drifted up. Secondly, we've all been traumatized to some extent by the recession of 2008-9, and we're all a little bit more leery of spending money. And last but not least, wealth is not evenly distributed. So while we in this room may be doing well because we have some stock, we have some bonds, and we own some property and a house and so on, a lot of folks don't. They're not enjoying the ride here. So it's helping. This is helping C, but not as much as we think. So because of all this wealth, look, we're borrowing more money. But the way we borrow money has changed. Look at the graph. There are a couple of cool things. First, look at the increase in yellow from 2003 to about 2008. It went way up, right? That was what was driving. That's mortgage debt. And that's why we went to hell in a handbasket. There was so much increase in mortgage debt made available that let everybody buy a house they couldn't afford the house, right? Look at it now. Mortgage debt's going up very leisurely now. So there's no problem with the housing market. We'll talk about housing market later. There's no problem there. But notice what's going up a lot is green, auto loans. And what's really going up is red, student loans. So it turns out that these kids are essentially turning 21, 22, 24, 25, and they have 2 payments already. $200, $250 a month for a car payment, and another $200, $250 a month in a student loan. Now, all of us in this room are too old to remember, but having $500 a month in a payment is a lot of money when you're starting your career. It's a tremendous burden, and it delays them from buying a house, and delays them getting married, and getting a tattoo, and whatever else they do. This is slowing them down. We're incurring more debt earlier in our lives than we have in the past. And that's slowing us down. These youngsters now, they may take them a while to get themselves engaged into the labor force and so on, but they're going to have longer lives than we are, and they're probably going to work later into their life than we are too, 68, 69. Wouldn't surprise me if the kids who are now 20 work till then. Because they start later, but they'll work longer also. So we're borrowing more money. That's juicing. See, it's very nice. It's all good. And we're happy. This is consumer confidence. There were 3 or 4 different groups that put out data, and they all show pretty much the same thing. Trump wins, there's a spike. it comes down a bit, and now it's back up again. Well, why is it back up? Trump really hasn't done a lot. Yeah, regulation's been deregulated, sure, but no one wins elections on deregulation, right? What's going on? Unemployment is 4.1%. When unemployment is that low, everything is good. You want a job, you got a job. You have a job, you're going to keep your job. You can feel safe, you can feel good, you can feel secure. You're not hanging on by a thread. We'll show data, no one's getting fired. I mean, this is really a good economy to be supplying labor into. And this solves a lot of the ills of the world. And you look at small business, they're crazy happy. And you can see where Trump wins right here. It's pretty clear, right there. It's just vertical, right up. And small business, all they want is a tax cut. This is what's making them animated. You know, the big companies want a fancy tax cut. They want to repatriate money and all this fancy stuff. But small business, they just want a cut because they can't figure out how to do a double Dutch Irish thing and leave all their human capital in Ireland and then have a special deal with Luxembourg. I mean, that's what Microsoft and all those companies do. Legal. But that's small guys can't do. You don't export, you can't do. And they haven't had their tax cut yet. But despite that, sentiment stays high because unemployment's 4.1, corporate profits are good, the stock market's doing well. All the other atmospherics are really good. Hard atmospherics and soft atmospherics are good. So they're happy. But you can tell by your political affiliation, it's not quite so simple. If you're a Republican on top in light blue, you're really happy. If you're a swing voter, you're in the middle. And if you're a Democrat, you're completely miserable. So, you know, Jim, if someone comes to your bank and says they want to, they want to borrow money, open an account, tell them you have to ask them their political affiliation. It's a new question. Corduroy at whatever his group is there requires you have to ask Caucasian, whatever are you male, female, whatever. And then say, oh, you're Democrat, I can't help you, you're unhappy, go somewhere else. Okay, I'm kidding, But there is this strife, and kidding aside, this strife has gotten worse and worse and worse. It was bad under Clinton, with Gingrich and Clinton going at it. And then it's just gotten worse and worse and worse, right? Under W, it was bad. Under Obama, it was worse. And now under Trump, it's still worse. And this is not good for our country. We really need to come together and get problems solved. We don't have the luxury of just of doing nothing and never compromising. This is not, we need adults in the room here. Now, I want to look here, what this I want to show you here looks at discretionary spending. C, we're back at C, right? And I don't care if you buy cornflakes. And I don't care if you go out and buy a pair of shoes or get a haircut. You do that because you're alive. I want to see you spend your money. What else do you spend your money on? Where's your money going? Are you frivolous with your money? Are you being a little bit profligate with your money? Because if you are, that makes me feel kind of good, as long as our balance sheets aren't a wreck, and household balance sheets are in very good shape. So we're going to hotels. This year's in red. All-time best was 2015 in dotted yellow. We're going to hotels. That's a good sign. It means, we're happy enough. We have income. We're going on a little vacation. That's lovely. That's helping C. Let's bump it up now. Oh, not just a vacation. We're going to Vegas. That's a bigger deal. Bigger trip, potentially much more expensive if things don't work out well. And while people talk about gambling, I hear this word, going to Vegas to gamble. And I want to reframe that a little bit and say, we don't gamble. At least I don't gamble when I go to Vegas. I'm sure you don't either. What you do, Barbara, is you invest in very short-term financial assets. It's completely different than gambling. And you can actually hedge, because you could bet on 8 and then also do red at the same time. So you're kind of hedging. There's all kinds of hedging and straddling. It's complicated. Gambling is not so easy. Investing. So we're going to Vegas, and you can see here, look at the red. The red's convention attendance. I don't know about you, but to me, convention attendance in Vegas is kind of like sending my 10-year-old daughter, she's now 19, but when she was 10, to Disneyland to do homework. It must happen accidentally, but no one really goes to Vegas to work, whatever. But that's a record. Attendance this year may not quite be a record, but it's pretty close, right? So we're doing okay. There's a shooting that took place there, and that's why the number may not be quite as good. Let's ratchet up again. Oh, we're buying cars. We're buying cars at good numbers. This deserves a moment here because there's a lot of car manufacturing and parts around here. So what we see here is a tremendous improvement from the end of 2009-10, right there. It shoots up like a rocket, and then it ends. Of course it ends. Everything ends. Nothing can go like this. If this kept going, you know, in a couple of years we'd buy 100 million cars a year. Okay, that's a little too many, right? I mean, we're now at 16, 17 million units. That's as good as it gets. We're done. The cycle here is peaked out. Mortgage, car payment defaults are going up, especially at the subprime level. This cycle's done. It won't get worse. I'm not suggesting things are going to go to hell here. No. But they're not going to get any better. And the reason the spike at the far right is there, that's because of Hurricane Harvey flooding all the cars in Texas. So they're going to buy new cars. But this cycle's done. If your business is expecting to do better because more cars will be sold, it's not going to happen. We're carred up. Cars are more expensive than they were before. They're more loaded with more features. People aren't buying sedans anymore. They're buying light trucks. They're buying SUVs and crossovers. And the cars last longer. They're physically better than they were before, too. So we don't turn the car. Our fleet can be older than it was 7 or 8 or 10, even 10 years ago. But cars are okay. They're okay. But we're not going to get 17 million and a half million units this year. We'll get 16 and a half and we'll call it good. So we're going to hotels, we're going to Vegas, we're buying cars. This is a pretty optimistic thing because you've got a payment schedule of 68, 60, 72, 84 months in some cases. This is fine. Oh, home repair is going on. That's also very expensive. New kitchen, $50,000, $60,000. A swimming pool, a new floor in your addition to your whole house. I want to sell my house, buy a condo, nothing to buy. We'll talk about that later. So I'm thinking now of improving my house. Let's make it nicer. I'll live here longer and we'll make it prettier. People are doing that. You have to be optimistic to spend that kind of money on your house. That's a very positive sign, right? This is positive. Here, how about buying a $500,000 horse? Imagine that. I bet you weren't thinking of that, but now you can. It's not you don't buy one this year, but you can save up. There's always tomorrow, right? And you can see it's very interesting. They peaked out in 2007. The auction in Keyland actually took place the week Lehman Brothers collapsed. So you can see the decline was right away palpable. And it took 6 or 7 or 8 years, and now we're back where we were before. So buying horses is now possible. And let's ratchet up one more time. Oh, how about an airplane? Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, what's it cost? 20, 30 million for a nice custom jet? Sure, why not? Consider, I'm sure you'd be happy to lend against it. Maybe not, I don't know, whatever.
Only if they're Republican.
Only if they're Republican. Good answer. Good answer, right, yeah. So, this is recovered too. So all these measures of discretionary income, cars, boats, RVs, hotels, we're spending our money, that's a good sign. You put it together, the growth year over year in seed is 2.775%. And it's been pretty steady. You can see from 2016 on, the last year and a half, it's been pretty rock solid, just below 3%. Pretty good number. If that were 3%, it's not, but if it were 3%, and this is little more than 2/3 of GDP, 2/3 of 3 is? 2, good. Public schools are very good here, yes. 2, this part, the 70% of GDP is really producing 80% of our growth at 2.7. Because GDP growth has been about 2.1 since the end of the recession. So 68% of GDP is doing close to 80% of the work, meaning that corporate investment I, government spending G, and exports have been a little bit subdued over the last 9 or 10 years. I's going to pick it up now a little bit. This is okay. Now let's talk about I. Why is I going to get better? Why is I better? I is better because oil prices are up. Oil prices are incredibly important to our country. We used to produce a lot of oil back in the 60s and 70s and then declined. But now we are again, we're the world's largest producer of hydrocarbons. Other countries produce, Qatar produces a little more natural gas, and Russia and Saudi Arabia a little more oil, but collectively no one's even close to us, and we're going to surpass Russia in oil production, I think, very soon. And to drill for oil is expensive, to keep rigs in operation is expensive, to move the oil from where you pump it to somewhere where you refine it is expensive, in a pipeline to build, or trucks, or trains. and then to refine it or crack it, not frack it. Frack you do in the field, but cracking is taking these long chemical chains of crude oil and literally breaking them. The shorter the chain of oil is, the more valuable it becomes. So you distill it to crack, to separate out the parts, but you crack it to create more value out of it. So then you can then distill it up at the distillation column and get more value out. A cracker plant, they put up 2 this week. They talked about 2 that were starting to build them. A $6 billion one and a $10 billion one. These are incredibly expensive, and they go because more oil is produced. Well, you need more refineries, you need more crackers. So this is a huge deal. This could bump up GDP by 1/3 of a point, all by itself, for almost half a point. This is a big, big deal for corporate investment. And it's going up again. The number of rigs is now starting to rise, because you can see on the far right, the price of oil goes up. It takes about 4 or 5 months for rig counts to rise based on oil price rise. A 4-month delay generally. So we should see rig counts start to rise again. Next, corporate profits are really good. Profits just ended this quarter. They looked, in Q3 we came up, and numbers are very good. Firms are making lots of money. That's helping the stock market, which is arguably overvalued. We can talk about during Q&A. But firms are happy. Moreover, the globe is doing well now. We have a synchronized global improvement. Europe is doing okay. 2 years ago, it looked like it was going to fall apart at the seams with Greece and all that stuff. Japan's turned around. They've had now like 6 or 7 quarters in a row of growth, best they've had in like 25 years, literally. Stock market's doing spectacularly well in Japan. So Japan's improving. The dollar's weakening, helping exports. Oil prices are up. I mean, this is really the best economy we've had globally since the end of the recession. Our growth isn't that fast. So in 2006, when we also had a synchronized global good recovery going on, good boom going on, growth is faster. This is as good as it's been since. So even if we falter slightly economically in the US, there's Japan and Europe and China and even Canada and Australia that are going to help us pull us forward. We're not the only locomotive right now. This is important to know. So all these reasons together are giving firms an incentive to invest in plant and equipment. Manufacturing is thrilled. The weak dollar has pushed manufacturing up to the upper 50s, low 60s. This is very high. These manufacturing firms invest a lot in plant and equipment. I hate to beat up on, I don't know, Starbucks. But, you know, for Starbucks to invest in plant and equipment means what? Buying a new Frappuccino maker? I mean, it's $500 or $1,000, I get it, but it's not like buying a new airplane, right? Or building a new assembly line. That's real money. So manufacturers do a lot of investment, and they're doing it now because we're also running out of workers. Unemployment is 4.1%. So you run a business and you want to expand your business, how do you do it? You hire workers, but there's no one to hire. Raise your hands if you have a hard time finding employees here in Madison with unemployment at 2.5%. I mean, this is ridiculously low. You need a magnifying glass to find someone who's unemployed around here. So you have to invest in plant and equipment to get more stuff. You have to invest in capital. There's no labor to get. They're happy. Look at this. Services in blue. That's the blue series here. It's the highest it's been since the series was invented back in 2008. A couple of guys went back and said it was higher in 2005. But this is, again, the best in 10 years. In services, it wasn't the best in 10, it's the best in 5 or 10. But these are, generally speaking, very positive numbers across the economy. Services, good, exports, corporate profits, manufacturing, energy prices. Wow! I mean, this is why you've got to enjoy this time. Don't complain. It's, you know, take a Xanax or something. just saying. So look at this graph. I mean, this graph, this is beautiful. I mean, this is like what economists dream about. Look at the far right. It's almost a vertical line. And normally when economics graphs go vertical, it's usually terrible. This is the beginning of the end. Something's bad going to happen or has happened. Unemployment's going up. But this is spectacular. This is a massive increase in corporate investment. Firms are really investing for all these reasons I've discussed. This is going to boost GDP. And and this is good. This is unambiguous. It helps GDP, it helps labor productivity, it boosts output, it boosts wages, it boosts profits. This is unambiguously good. And if Trump could do more to stimulate this, it would be even better. He does a little of the corporate tax, but not a lot. This is great. Now let's talk about government, because this is going to revolve around the tax cuts and tax reform that we're talking about. And this is complicated. So let's first look at the background. The horizontal line is neutral, 0. So right now, fiscal policy is neutral, and it was neutral here. Notice there's a gray bar right here. The gray bar hits, we go into recession, the government ramps up spending. Medicare, unemployment insurance goes up, CHIP goes up, welfare goes up. All these automatic stabilizing social programs kick into force to dampen the recession. And then government will also deficit spend a little extra to boost the economy. We get out of the recession here, and we go back into a big recession, and there's massive amounts of fiscal stimulus. To give you an idea of how crummy our economy was, notice here that the lines max out at around 3% stimulus, right? But the federal deficit was 10% of GDP. So we spent 10% of GDP, and it only was stimulative to the effect of 3% because demand collapsed by 7%. So had they just increased it by 7%, it would have been neutral, and there'd have been no increases. These bars here would have been 0 at a deficit of 7%. But by making it 10%, we got some stim. Congress then accidentally was contractionary here. It was a mistake. They didn't mean to do it. It was sequestration. It was a mistake. Be that as it may, we're now neutral. So the question is, what do you do now? So Trump's proposing a tax cut, tax reform, but a tax cut that's $1.5 trillion. Over a decade. So it starts out at $100 billion a year now, roughly, and then over 10 years doubles to about $200 billion a year, averaging $150 billion for 10 years. There are a couple of things to think about here first. Will it pass? I am somewhat skeptical it will pass. Let me tell you why. The last time we had tax reform was 1986, 30 years ago, because it's hard. And back then it worked out for a bunch of lucky reasons, hard work and so on. First, it was bipartisan. So the Democrats could gore their people, and the Republicans could gore theirs. And they both said, look, we're both doing it to our supporters. Don't yell at us. We're lowering rates. The benefit is lower rates, but we're getting rid of a whole bunch of deductions, exclusions, exemptions, and so on and so forth. So they could blame the other party. It was bipartisan. It was bipartisan because it was neutral budgetary reasons. The Republicans wanted a cut. The Democrats wanted a tax increase. They compromised on neutrality. There were a number of senators on both sides that had been pushing on this for years and talking about it for years. A guy named Roth from Delaware and a guy named Bill Bradley from New Jersey. In the House, there were guys on both sides who had been pushing for this for years. Dick Gephardt on the Democratic side and Jack Kemp on the Republican side. All these guys had been pushing on it for years. Reagan was invested in this, and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill were invested. And Reagan's popularity was 60%. Last I checked, Trump's popularity was just a skosh lower. With all those things going for it, it barely passed. So it's a tough road. Because the problem they're running into now is they've discovered that people are unhappy because a lot of people are going to have a tax increase. If not immediately in several years, when some of the tax cuts wear out because of parliamentary rules and so on. I can get into that during Q&A. So now they're trying to do healthcare reform to get the $338 billion they can get if they sort of ditch much of Obamacare. They need the money to make it more palatable. That's the problem. It's very difficult because tax reform has winners and losers. You own a house, you have mortgage interest deduction, wave it goodbye. You pay sales tax, property tax on your house, wave it goodbye. You have income taxes here, wave it goodbye. The Republicans are going to take it all away from you. They're going to give you some other things, but some of us are going to be winners, and some are going to be losers, and losers complain. It's very hard to withstand it when you can't blame the other side, as they could before when it was bipartisan. Now, W did tax cuts, just straight tax cuts back in 2003. He did 2 sets, if I'm not mistaken. But times were different then. He's doing it the same way they're doing it now, reconciliation with a budget resolution, reconciliation, 51 votes in the Senate, no Democratic support, no filibuster possible. Well, if he did it then, why can't they do it now? The difference is back then, the CBO, the OMB, all those budget estimating groups in DC that matter, projected a $5.7 trillion surplus over the next 10 years, from 2002 through 2012, and they budget in 10-year cycles. You always budget 10 years ahead. Now, however, budget deficit's going to be about $10 trillion over the next 10 years. Not surplus of $6 trillion, a deficit of about $10.1 trillion. It's a lot harder having a tax cut when you've already got a budget deficit of $10 trillion. It's partisan with an unpopular president, and you're making enemies by doing it because someone's going to have their taxes raised. Do they need to do this? They need to do it desperately. I mean, this is life or death for the Republicans. If they don't pass this, they're toast. Their donors are going to say, no money. So they have to get it done. But their majority in the Senate's tuned. It's very tight. And who knows how Olympia Snowe will vote? Who knows how, I forgot her name, Alaska will vote? Murkowski? There are a couple people who, last time on health care, killed it. McCain? Who knows how Flake will do now? He and Trump aren't such good friends. And little Bob Corker may not be happy either. You just don't know. You have enemies lurking around, and you never know when they're going to come back and kick you, right? So they need to pass it. Will they? I don't know. But let's suppose they pass it. What will it do for our economy? When you want to increase the deficit and you want to fiscally stimulate your economy, you want to do it because you have slack resources. You got people who are unemployed, things aren't going well. Okay, here, let's suppose we all have $1,000 more in our pocket, and let's suppose you run a store and you sell men's clothing, okay? Maybe you do hair transplanting. Who's your friend, right? Not me, obviously. So let's suppose we do that. Now, you know we all have an extra $1,000. We're going to go buy clothing. You can't sell more clothes. You don't have any more saleswomen and salesmen because there's no one, unemployment's this low. So you can't accommodate the increase in business that will come. You'll raise your prices instead. We'll all raise our prices. And that's what happens when you stimulate an economy that's at essentially or over full employment. There's no reason to stimulate this economy right now. We need tax reform in a big bad way. Getting rid of deductions, exclusions, exemptions, and lowering the rate like we did in '86. But we don't need a stimulus because unemployment's 4.1. We needed stimulus back in 2008 or 9 when unemployment was 10% and we were losing 600,000 jobs a month. That was a calamity. Now we don't need it. So if we get it, it'll be inflationary. And if it's inflationary, the Fed will raise rates faster. So I'm not a big fan of this. I mean, I'd like a couple $1,000 off, don't get me wrong, but don't spend it, save it. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I'm not convinced it will do much to our economic growth. It'll boost it in the short run by a couple tenths of a point, and then we're done. Then we're done. So this is the dollar. It's now gotten weaker. Higher is stronger, down is weaker. It's gotten weaker, helping exports a bit. Nothing a lot, but a couple billion a month, you know. 20 billion a year, it's something not huge. Our economy is almost $20 trillion. So you put it together, that's GDP growth. And you can see it's kind of lackluster. 2.1, 2.2% since the end of the recession. Does it get better next year? Yeah, corporate investment gets a little better, pumps it up. The tax cut, if it happens, bump it up a little bit. So instead of 2.2, we get 2.6. And the tax cut won't come right away. And a lot of it only comes in 2018. I mean, and the Senate wants to bring it in piecemeal because they don't have enough money. They only allow $1.5 trillion over a decade. The rules are complicated there. So the stimulus won't come right away. It's okay. It's solid because the globe is doing well. That's what's important now. Why are we having this? It isn't us pulling the locomotive. There are other places out there as well. Global trade is going up a little bit too. That's also boosting global growth and our growth as well. So that's very good. But there's a catch. The catch is we can't grow very fast. This growth that we're seeing here, back one slide here, that's about as good as it gets. 2.5 maybe, you know, was the extra investment by firms. Here's why. GDP only comes from two reasons. Boosting in GDP only comes from two things. It comes from more people working. So here, we're back to the bank. You want to make a bigger bank? You buy a new branch, build a branch, and you hire people to work in the branch. But if you can't find workers, you can't open the branch. So that route for growing your business is gone. Well, how about the other route? The workers that I have, let's make them more productive. I'll send them off for training, they'll go to college more, they'll go to school more, we'll have evening classes, we'll hire late capital to help them work better, some software packages or whatever, and boost productivity. Okay, more people working is blue, and people working smarter with more capital and software and hardware machinery is the red. But they're low, they're very low. Not many people. It's like, at the boom, when the baby boomers were born, I guess intercourse was more fun then than it is today. But no people. And we know that Trump wants to kick out the DACA kids, 800,000. Not a lot, but when you have no people, you need more people. So we need to push the 1.2. This should be the focus of everything that goes on in Washington, is how to increase labor productivity, how to convince people to go to school and increase their human capital, become a welder, an elevator repairman, a technician, or something, engineer, whatever it is, how to get firms to invest in plant and equipment, because that's the only way we're going to get the red thing up higher. And that's all we got. We don't have population growth. No one does. China's shrinking, Japan's shrinking, Europe's shrinking. Population, first time in the world, is shrinking outside of Africa pretty much everywhere. South America, it's unbelievable. It's the first time in history. But we need more people. We need the people. We have to get more people in to the labor force. Encourage, have daycare so women can leave the house and go to the labor force and work. Yeah, that's going to increase labor pool. Do it. We got to think of how to get more people in and more people in who are more productive. That's the critical thing. Last but not least, no recession. This is my favorite measure of recession, and it's the yield curve measure. Our yield curves look like this, right? The longer you borrow, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the more expensive the money, because the lender's taking all kinds of risk, credit risk, interest rate risk, default risk, whatever it is, right? Overnight, you're not going to default. But over a year or 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, it gets much higher. But look at the yield curve. The way the yield curve, this chart is designed is, normally the yield curve looks like this. But occasionally the yield curve flattens and then it inverts. And short-term money becomes more expensive than long-term money. Forget why, not relevant. Whenever that happens, the yield curve actually inverts. The blue squiggle goes above the red bar. And every time it happens, except in 1966, it's followed by recession. Here, a recession, yield curve inverts, recession, yield curve inverts, recession, inversion, recession, inversion, recession. If you're in business and you see a yield curve inversion, just sell your business, go home. Just stay home, play tiddlywinks, travel around the world, go on a cruise, buy an RV, forget it. You can't fight this. Unless you want to become a repo guy or something. Because that might huge career for a couple of years, repoing houses and cars and stuff. So the good news is, we're not near inversion. The problem, however, is the slope of the curve is shallow, because the gap between the blue and the red is just 90 basis points now, or 0.9%. It was 3%, 300 basis points here. So, which means that the height differential between here and here, this distance is now just 1%, as opposed to 3%. It's much steeper. That's not good. Banks don't want to lend much because they don't make any money on it, so they take all the risk, but they don't get the reward. And this is telling us that long-term growth isn't there. The Fed's raising short-term rates. That's why the short end of the yield curve here is coming up higher. But the long end isn't going up, because the long end is determined by long-term inflation expectations and GDP growth. And there's not much of any of that happening. So the bottom's coming up, but the top's not going up. The Fed's going to try and boost the top too, but not having much luck at it. So this is a cautionary note that our economy may not grow so fast because of this. We're realizing this to some extent. And this is the synchronized growth I talked about earlier. It's all green. It's the first year, all green. Red is contraction, green is growth, dark green is the best. This year, most countries are dark green. There's 45 countries here. It's the first time since '07 we've had that. This is a synchronized global improvement. And the magical thing is, despite it being global, we don't have commodity prices going crazy. Oil's a bit, but that's about it. Wheat, food ag prices down super low. Soybeans, wheat, corn, alfalfa, all this is low. Commodities like copper and stuff, they're going up, but nothing remarkable. This is an incredibly slow economy with very little inflation, which we'll talk about in some detail now. Let's talk about labor markets. What's going on here? This is where we run out of workers. We are running out of workers. So we used to produce here a couple of years ago 3 million workers. The peak right there. Now it's 2. It's 2 because there's no one to hire. 5 years ago, you could go and say, oh, I need to hire, let's see, a doctor who's an economist and a lawyer, and you'll pay them $12 an hour. And there were 100 people who want the job. Now there's nobody, 0. You kind of keep raising wages a bit, but there's no one to hire. You can't find workers. So given how tight unemployment is, to create 2 million jobs a year, over a year, is very good numbers, given that we're 8.5 years into a recovery. But if we stimulate the economy, there's still not going to be any workers. This is really strange, right? I understand why the Republicans want to do it. I get it. Politically, they have no choice, perhaps. But economically, there's no need to do it. It'll be overly stimulative to our economy. Look at the next slide and show you how good this is. Unemployment, 4.1%. The last time the red graph was this low was here in the dot-com boom in 1999. And before that, it was here in 68, 69. Janis Joplin was a popular star back then, you know. This is a long time ago. This is the second or third best labor market we've had in 50 years. The red number says if you want a job, you've got it. And the blue line on this axis here is people who claim unemployment insurance, who are fired or laid off. Involuntary separation is the fancy word. It's been below 300,000. You see the second horizontal line there. For 130 some odd weeks, 139 weeks. That's the longest it's been since back here in the late 60s. Our country was much smaller back then, like 2/3 the size. To have this few people claiming unemployment when our country is so much bigger is staggering. It means you can't lose your job. Look, if your boss has a really attractive spouse, make a pass. Because there's never been a better time to sabotage your career than now. Because you will find another job somewhere. It may not be the same place, as much money, but you'll get something. Don't worry about it. You'll find, because there's no one unemployed to hire anymore. I used to be a CFO, but now I'm a line worker putting on hubcaps. Yeah, but at least I got a job, you know, after me to pass at my boss's husband or something, whatever, you know. But this is good. Look here. This is number of job seekers per job. So at its worst, it was 7. That meant there were, for example, 14 million unemployed Americans, and there were 2 million job openings. So 14 over 2. 7. There were 7 people looking for every job on average. That's terrible. Look at it now. It's lower than it was at the housing boom. The same as it was in the dot-com boom. The best labor market since then. Now, it's different. Labor force participation rates are down, employment to population ratios. I understand that. But nonetheless, this is the labor force we got. It ain't going to get better. You're not going to find more workers because you're at 2.5% unemployment. Look here. This is a measure of how much slack there is. So the green is the official unemployment rate, 4.1%. But people tell me, they say to me, Elliot, that isn't the real unemployment number. I can't trust that number. How about the U6 number? Well, the U6 number is the green plus the blue. The blue is people who work part-time who want to work full-time. So there's some slack there. Not a lot of slack, but they could work more. They're working 20 hours, they want to work 40 hours. And then the last one in red is both discouraged workers and marginally attached. I forgot the distinction, but they're people who would like a job and aren't really looking hard and stuff like that. Compare the levels where they are today, here to there. That's the housing boom, just to the left of the bar, and here to the left, that's the dot-com boom. There's not a lot of difference. This legitimately is an exceptionally good labor. The green number here is lower than it is there, but not quite as low as it was there. The blue one is a little bit lower there, and the red is super low in all of them. There's no one left to hire. This 4.1 is a reasonably good indication of what's going on. No one's lying here. Here's another measure of how good things are. This is the gap between the unemployment rate, which is 4.1%, and the unemployment rate for African Americans. And it's 3, so it means it's 7.1% for African Americans. It's too high, should be lower. Things we can do, training, education, schools, a whole bunch of a lot of programs that can be done here. But I'm not going there right now. My point is look at that number on the far right, and now take that bottom line, 3, and go across and tell me the last time it was lower. There's no one left. Hispanics, same thing. There's no one left out there. This is unusual. So we have an economy growing at 2.2, kind of lackluster, but spectacularly low unemployment because labor productivity is crummy. Remember that bar graph I had with the 1.2 and the 0.7? That 1.2 is low. Because the 1.2 is low, to get more out of your firm, you have to hire a lot more people. GDP growth the last 2 quarters has been really good, 3%. 2.1 Q2 and 3.0 Q3. But to get that growth, we've had to lower the unemployment rate a lot. Because labor productivity stinks. We can't keep doing this because we're running out of workers. That's how we're going to trend back to 2.5%, 2.4% GDP. We can't sustain 3 because labor productivity is not high enough to allow us to do it. We're eating through unemployment to get there. And at 4.1, it's already very low. You would think wage growth would be spectacular in these conditions, but it's not. I'll tell you why in a second, but let's look at the data first. 2.4% wage growth. How can it be so low when unemployment is so low? You think workers are scarce, firms will pay more money up. But labor productivity is low. If they pay workers more than labor productivity growth, which is 1.2%, it comes out of corporate profits. Firms aren't big on that. They don't want to take their shareholder money. No, we're just not going to hire you instead. So there's an upper limit that can come because it comes out of profits. That's why we need more labor productivity. That way you can pay workers more and firms make more profit. Everybody's happy. But if labor productivity is weak, it puts an upper cap, if you will, on wage growth because firms don't want to take it out of what becomes retained earnings or dividends or something, right? This is relatively low. Now, this data is contaminated because lots of older people are retiring. Guys like, well, you. So you're making good money, you work for a fancy bank apparently, you're doing well, you're making $1 million, you're on the verge of buying a jet. Maybe 2 jets. One's not enough for you, you need 2. One to follow the other, like Jeff Immelt at GE. He had 2 of them apparently, in case it broke down. Imagine, wow, okay, I'm not going to go there. But, so you're retiring, you're making $500,000 a year, and you're replaced by this beautiful young woman who's a college, just finished college, and you're making $50,000. So $500,000 leaves, $50,000 starts. That's bringing down wages. If you clean up for that demographic effect, which is very strong because the number of boomers retiring is huge, the 2.4 becomes more like 3.5. That's better. But it's not as good as it was here, the housing boom, 4.5. Or here, the dot-com boom, 5.5. So wages still have to get a little bit better, all right? Need a little better wages. Here's why. A lot of low-paying jobs. Medical assistants, laborers in freight, janitors and cleaners, home health aides, personal care, food service. Not a lot of wages there. That's reason number one. Reason number two, trade unionization levels have declined, and unions help workers get more money. Another one, the gig economy is bigger. We're now working for Uber. No one gets rich working for Uber. It's not possible. You can't, right? There's no barriers to entry. And this guy's going to work for Uber, apparently. Yes. Changing his mind. It's been nice knowing you. Thanks for that beautiful Menominee welcome. Yeah, okay. So this maybe hurts our economy. Fewer new companies are being formed. And the companies that are out there like Google and Microsoft and Amazon are huge monopolists. There's not a lot of competition. They underinvest. They underinvest. There are few Amazons, few of them, a couple, they'd be fighting more, but there aren't. It's a bit of a problem. Also, capital expenditures that's going up now, finally going up, is the blue. So it was 80% back here in 1990. It shrinks. It levels out around 05, it's flat. That's part of the reason why labor productivity stinks. Firms haven't been investing in plant and equipment to boost capital per worker, boosting labor productivity. And as a result, look at labor productivity growth. This is in particular in manufacturing, but there's been no improvement in 4 years. Well, how are you going to pay someone more money if they don't make more stuff? That's why GDP is lackluster. That's why firms have to hire lots of people to make more stuff, because you can't get more stuff out of the people that you got. This is not a trivial problem, all right? This is serious. So how about inflation? This guy's got to go too. He's going to work on his labor productivity. Go back to college, dude. Get a skill, man. How about inflation? Inflation's weak. Inflation. This is the CPI. What you think of as inflation. You know, buying just the stuff you buy. Everyday stuff. Gasoline, buy a car, go on vacation, see a doctor, whatever. I draw your attention to the red, because that's core. Blue is headline. Core subtracts out food and energy, because they bounce around a lot, unrelated to US growth. It was flat, and then it declined. Declined! 8.5 years into recovery, no workers, and inflation's going down? It's at one point, the red is at 1.7 or something, right? The Fed doesn't look at this one. They look at something called the PCE. The red's even further. It was flat there, 1.8, and it's been tumbling ever since. Okay, it looks like maybe it's flattening out now, but this is remarkably low. So the Fed's struggling. How can it be so late in a recovery, such low levels of unemployment, yet no inflation and weak wage growth? We explained the wage growth, maybe. No one's really sure, possibly. What's going on? What's the Fed? Does the Fed raise rates prematurely? Because the Fed's job, remember, is to take the punch bowl away before the party gets going. And the party at 4.1% is kind of already roaring here, right? We don't want to see inflation go like that. Then they got to raise rates really fast. They don't want to do that. So maybe we raise them in advance, slowly and gingerly and leisurely, so that we can control and be ahead of the curve. But maybe we go too fast. If we go too fast, it will drive us into a recession, because we're a slow growth economy, because labor productivity and population growth are very weak. We can't withstand high rates because we don't grow. If you're on a bicycle and you're going 25 miles an hour and a gust of wind comes, you can withstand a gust of wind. But if you're going 3 miles an hour on the bicycle and a gust of wind comes, it knocks you over. Interest rate hikes are like gusts of wind. Our economy is the bicycle moving. We're not going so fast. And inflation expectations are very low. This is the 5-year forward, 5-year break-even rate in red, and the 10-year. This is 5 and 10-year expectations of inflation. They're below 2%. In Japan, people think there'll never be inflation, and there isn't. If we believe there's not going to be inflation, we behave in that way. We don't ask for wage increases and so on and so forth. Volcker, back in '79, had to drive us into 2 recessions to get it out of our heads that inflation was not 10% a year. It was painful because our beliefs drive our behavior. And the Fed's very concerned that if it gets lodged in our head, we're in trouble. So how fast will rates rise? So let's think about this. This is a slide that I think answers the question really easily. What we do here is we look at the height of the Fed chairman, and interest rates. Volcker was 6'8", rates were high. Greenspan was shorter, rates came down. Bernanke was shorter, they came down. Yellen was shorter, they came down. Powell's a mistake. It's obvious. You don't have to be a genius to figure this one out. He's tall, man. We're making a mistake. So what's going on here? Look, it's they're correlated, but not causally opposite. I think Powell was a particularly uninspired choice. He's the wrong guy. He's a smart guy, he works hard. He's an investment banker who's a lawyer who really doesn't understand monetary policy. Except for running the world's biggest central bank, it's totally fine. I'm kidding. The problem he runs into is twofold. He doesn't know anything, smart, but doesn't know. The bigger problem is he won't have the moral suasion that Yellen had over everybody else on the committee. Everybody else wants to do this. They all want to go and talk. And unless you can corral them and convince them that the chair has the right ideas and collectively get to the right ideas, they're all going to be saying whatever they want. And the markets are going to be confused and upset, and it's going to jerk around for no good reason. Yellen's managed to do some very difficult things like Bernanke did, and do them flawlessly because she was ready, she was prepared, and she had moral suasion on her side, and she had an intellectual vigor to keep people quiet and convince them that her way deserved time to see if it worked. He may not have that luxury. Moreover, all the people on the Fed who've been there for years, they're all retiring or their vacancies for one reason or another. There'll be almost 100% turnover in the Fed over the next 8 months, bizarrely. So he won't have any intellectual capital to pull on the committee. People who've been through the wars in the past, he doesn't have enough experience. The possibility of a monetary policy error bumps up. That's what makes me nervous. He's smart, he's hardworking, but that doesn't get you enough. You need more. So what's rates going to do? Right now they're 1.125, and that's where I thought they'd be last year when I was here. I said they'd end this year at that rate. Of course, they're not going to. They're going to end the year at 1.375. So I was off by a bit, but not half that. Now, the year after, they raised rates between 2 and 4 times. I put down 3. I just don't know. If GDP goes up more than we think, they may raise rates faster. And if inflation appears, they'll raise rates faster. But if we have weak GDP growth and weak inflation, they'll raise rates very little, because our economy won't be able to withstand the higher rates. And the next year they raise them 2 more times, and that's kind of it. Maybe in 2020, 1 more time. Very meager growth in interest rates over 5 years. This is amazingly slow, right? Nothing really happening here. They're going to start to cut their balance sheet here. That's going to raise the long end of the yield curve, hopefully increasing the steepness of the yield curve, making bankers and investors happy. But we'll see about how that goes. But so far, so good. Now, let's talk about real estate. The real estate problems you face here in the city are identical everywhere in the country. You think you're a snowflake, you're not a snowflake, okay? We're all snowflakes, but we're all alike or whatever. So this is the issue. Housing construction is in red. It looks very good. It's pretty high. Not as high as it was in 05, but by historic standards, in the last 20 years, it's pretty good. It's deceptively good, however. It's not that good, really, because we're building really big houses. That's the problem. Back here in the 1990s, 1980s, 1990, that's 2001, 2, 3, 4. That's the 80s. The 80s, we built 400,000 houses with dark color, black and gray. And that's about what we're building today. But back then, we built all those other blue houses. But now we're not building the blue houses. All we do is build big homes. That's it. They're really expensive. That pushes total spending up, making the red look good. But we're not building many units. That's the problem. Why? Regulation. $65,000 in regulatory costs 8 or 9 years ago. Now it's up to $85,000. $20,000 extra in regulatory costs to build a house. If you raise the cost of construction by $20,000, the house has to cost $60,000 or $70,000 more to pencil in. Well, then you've given up building affordable homes. Just gone. Entry-level homes in every city in the country aren't being built. They're building everything else except entry-level homes everywhere. And this lack of homes is causing all kinds of problems. Labor costs have gone up. Lumber costs have gone up. There's a trade war with Canada on softwood lumber, and so on. So inventory declines. No inventory. It's been going down this is not seasonally adjusted, so the first 6 months of the year it goes up and then down, and up and down, and up and down. That's seasonal. But look at the cycle. The peaks keep getting lower, the troughs keep getting lower. We're running out of houses. We're underbuilt houses. We're underbuilt 4 million, 5 million homes. We're creating 2 million jobs, not enough homes. Big demand, no supply, prices go up. It's totally this is totally organically a fine reason to see prices. It's too bad, but it's not abnormal. And moreover, foreigners are buying our houses. The gall. Miserable, stinking Canadians, Chinese, Indians, Mexicans, and Brits are the 5 most popular countries. And they're the highest they've been in a couple years, except for the poor guys from the UK who are leaving Europe. But this is adding more strain in Miami, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle. Not so much Madison, but you get the point. We're running out of homes, more foreigners, not enough entry-level homes. So prices are going up at 6% nationally. This is unaffordable. Wages, I told you earlier, were going up at 3.5 or 3.6. You can't sustain 3.6 wage increases with 6% house price increases. That's just can't. And if something's unsustainable, eventually it stops. We'll watch in a moment and see what happens there. But first, no housing bubble. No bubble. Look back here between 03 and 06 or 07. The deterioration in FICO was profound from 740 to about 695, or roughly 50 points of FICO. That's what led in my early slide to the yellow going way up. It was because this was going way down. But now, no problem. You can look at by decile, you can look at by quartile, by quintile. There's been no deterioration in FICO at any given area. There's no problem. People are getting homes who deserve to get the mortgage. The problem is there are no homes. There's more bidding wars for the houses that are around. Look here. Blue is multifam. Multifam is peaked out. Not here necessarily, but nationally it's peaked out. It's coming down a bit. Red is single fam. It continues to chug up. But it should be at least 1.2 million by now. It's at 800,000, so we're 400,000 homes short. And we've been short by more homes in prior years. Whereas I said, 4 or 5 million houses short. This problem ain't going to go away. We're still producing a lot of jobs. Next coming year, 1.8 million, 1.75, less than 2, but still way more than our houses. So the green is total homes built. It's flat because blue is pushing it down. Not enough homes. This is crazy. No credit. So it's not a credit. That's a credit bubble. This is no credit bubble. No. And people have student loans, I mentioned earlier. So they can't buy a house. Imagine if there was a credit bubble. Or imagine if there was no student loan problem. There'd be even more problems with more people wanting to buy homes. They'd go even faster. This is reducing the rate of increase in house prices. In terms of refi activity, there's nothing going on because interest rates are flat to going up, right? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Look at this graph. This is first-time mortgage apps. Notice its decline and flattened out of late, right? Now, it's done that before. It did it, it came down here for a while. It's come down before. This isn't the first time it's come down. But I think something's... Now, it says it's up 10% year over year. That's because you're comparing this trough right there at the end to where we are now, right? The gap, the differential between those two is big because that little dip right there, right? The end of 16, now it's the end of 17. It looks better than it is. It's really just about zero. So we have essentially no change in year-over-year first-time mortgage apps. This is existing home sales. It peaked out at over 7 million seasonally adjusted annual rate. Collapsed, improves. This gets us to the end of 15. Now, let's bring it forward. Up, flat. The last year. No increase in sales. No homes. Price is too expensive. No inventory. It doesn't go up. That's why the mortgage apps are weakening, because there's nothing to buy. This is pending sales. So what's going to happen in 2-3 months? Below the line, they're going down. We're beginning to see some resistance of some kind here. Either it's people can't afford, there's nothing to buy, a combination of both. I'm not saying prices are going to keep going up 5, 6% maybe, but volume can't go up because we're not building enough homes. And this is coming home to roost. You can't keep selling more homes when there's no homes to sell. And now we've sort of hit the wall here, right? Hit the wall. And it's not going to get any better because the peak boomers now are getting close to buying a home. And as this mass of 25 and 27-year-olds turns 28 and 29, the demand for single-family construction keeps going up. We need more homes. We need something to pick up the slack. Multifamily vacancies are low. They're great. Keep up with it. There's a push, going to be a push demographically overall for more single. Just as these people here drove multifam for a long time, they're now aging into single fam. But not all of them, of course. It depends on vacancy rates, right? If it's low, you have more space to go. In terms of these millennials, look, they don't own their home. They've never been married compared to other people 30 years older, 30 years ago, same age. They don't have a kid. They don't own a home. They're just bums. They don't work. They don't have a car. They don't drink. They don't smoke. And we know teen pregnancy rates are way down. I alluded to that earlier, right? The reason is, well, they don't work, they don't have a car, they don't drink, they don't smoke. That's why they're different. They'll get there, but they're not there now. They're not there now, all right? But their population, as they age, will get bigger, and they'll get there. They'll move into houses and do all that stuff. And don't forget the boomers. There's a bunch of boomers, too. Let's now look quickly at what's going on here, and we'll wrap it up. For those of you who don't live here in Wisconsin, there's a big arrow. The reason you look weak along with Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana is because of autos. Autos are weak. So your car park guys, you're not having a good time right now. You know, if AMC were around, they'd now be bankrupt. Okay, I'm kidding. Okay. But it gets better. Look now, this is leading economic indicators, so you're fine. You're fine. It's a temporal thing. You work through this, and you're back up to good. And your unemployment rates here are crazy low. Look at this graph. So this is where you are. This is Wisconsin. You're super low. You're barely above 3%, right? This is crazy low. You're the bottom quarter of the country. You're also a nice place to live. People aren't moving out of Wisconsin. They're moving out of Illinois, they're moving out of Ohio, but they're not moving out of Wisconsin. You and Minnesota and Michigan are fine. So you can go east and west, just don't go south. No south. No south. Don't visit Illinois. Don't email your friends. Nothing. This is population growth around here in Madison. And what you see is an outlier in Dane. They're the one that matters, I get it. And they're doing spectacularly well. The U.S. is in red thick, and Wisconsin's in blue thick. And Dane's killing them all. But the other counties here, you know, Columbia, Iowa Green, nothing going on there. Nothing. There's nothing going on. Why? Look at that. The inflow of people into Dane is spectacular. This is a job magnet. I mean, this is obvious. Unemployment's low. You got a big fancy university. And you have tons of companies sprouting up, doing all kinds of cool things. So people say, yeah, I'll move there and get a job. And that's what that shows. The influx of population from elsewhere is huge. It could be next door county. It could be coming from Iowa, Columbia, and Green. But they're moving in here, by God, they're moving in. GDP growth for Wisconsin in blue, country in red's a little lower here because your population growth is a little slow. So population adjusted, you're fine, thank you very much, but just a little weaker, right? Look at these unemployment rates. This is crazy. You're at 2.5% here. These are obscenely low rates. You are like a petri dish experiment in what you do when there's no one to hire. What do you do? You're like, come to see how the crazies in Madison manage, right? I mean, even the worst crummy place in Racine's really crummy, let me tell you. Even then, it's just 4.5, and they came up a bit, which is good. I'll show you why in a second. So you see here, this is labor force growth. This is people who work and want to work. And you can see the growth here is about 2% roughly. Some are 1, some are higher, right? But the payroll growth, you know, the gap between these two slides, that's why the unemployment rate keeps falling. You got a problem here. You're running out of workers. You're just running out of workers. There's nothing you can do. There's just nothing you can do. This is per capita income, you're running away with it. Madison's running away with it, just running away with it. Right? Milwaukee second, you're running away. Racine seems to be really doing the worst. They were They were up tied with a couple other places, and now they've fallen behind both Appleton, I think, and Green Bay, in green and purple. House prices here, taken off like a rocket. Unemployment's 2.5. Job growth is good. That's why you have no homes, not enough homes. Build more homes. This problem will weaken a little, at least a little. Here's housing starts. Single fam, really, you need a microscope. We're back at levels we had in the 2000s. Red is single fam. The gap between red and blue is multi-fam. It's doing pretty well. It's picking up the slack. Something has to pick up the slack. But if vacancy rates are low, you need more homes, right? I've covered too much territory. I've taken too long with. This is my email address, my website, my phone number, my Twitter handle, and so on. And as you delicately and kindly alluded to earlier, I put out 70 words on the economy. 70 words, never more, ever. No graphs, no charts, no ads, no links, no photos. If you want to get it, give me your business card. Sign up at my website, econ70.com, or text the word bow tie. No space and no hyphen. Suppress the spell checker to the 5-digit number 22828. It'll then ask you for your email address. Type it in. You'll hear from me every day till you die. You cannot unsubscribe from this website. I have special permission from ICANN. No, you cannot unsubscribe. At this point, hopefully we have a few minutes for Q&A. By all means, think of your best question. Don't be shy. There are no dumb questions. At least publicly.
So, you've seen the press about Foxconn coming in and our state investing a tremendous amount of resources in bringing in those jobs. What's your thoughts on that?
It might work out. And I'll give you the best scenario I can. And it's a pretty good scenario. And they must have brought this up in the papers, I would imagine here. I don't know this for a fact. Greenville, South Carolina has done pretty well for itself. They gave away the store to get a BMW assembly plant. It's worked out spectacularly well. All these other companies are there supplying for BMW. Now other auto manufacturers are moving there because they have a base and so on. Their manufacturing percentage of their population continues to decline despite the increase from the investment by BMW. But it's really turned Greenville around. That's the best. Otherwise, sometimes it's just a waste of money. The jobs don't end up materializing. These aren't going to be terribly high-paying jobs. They're more assembly jobs. They're not designing circuits and so on and so forth. I'm mildly negative on this. It won't be a disaster. You're giving them, what, $5 billion or $8 billion, some staggering amount of money. Over 20 years, you get your money back. You create some jobs. Maybe you get some buzz, and maybe you get lucky, and you hit the brass ring. It's possible. Is it worth taking the flyer on it? We could argue. It's conservatively, I would say no, but you know, you're in a good mood, you're feeling goody about yourself, you know, give it a whirl. So it's like opening a casino. It doesn't usually work, but there are exceptions. So mildly negative on that one. Sorry. Any more questions? On the way back there. One in front. Sir.
The question of tax reform, I don't think it'll pass. And the reason I don't think it'll pass is you read through H.R. 1, released November 3rd of this year on the Congress site, I should confirm it. Most of us are in LLCs or sub-S's. The rate still stays at 39%, give or take 100 basis points.
Well, it depends. You can do 70, 30 if it's
Right.
passive.
So it doesn't do us any good. The corporate thing may go or not. So I see no incentive to any of us, and I think the senators will drop off. Because this tax reform to a small business person
It's worthless.
is not worth it.
It's not helping me.
Right, and then we get rid of alternative minimum tax, each one. But I don't know where our deductions are. We've lost the market tax credits. We've lost the federal tax credits. I don't see any incentive for anything to go forward. I think it's one of the biggest disasters I've ever seen.
Whether it passes or not, you know, I don't. You said I have my doubts. You have your doubts. They'll prove us wrong and pass it now after, with the Obamacare repeal of the mandate. Who knows? But you look at homeowners. You buy a home a couple of years ago, you're not a happy camper all of a sudden. You've lost all your deductions essentially. They made a lot of enemies in this bill in exchange to get the corporate rate down to 20, which doesn't do most people any good, right? Had they dropped the corporate rate to 25 and not 20, not gotten rid of the inheritance tax or the death tax, depending on what you want to call it, they would have had more money. They could have done some other things. I think there were some strategic errors. But I'm also not Mitch McConnell, and I think Mitch McConnell is responding to some very heavy, intense donors here who are demanding things from him, quite frankly. We won, you're our stooge, get it done. I think that's the pressure he's facing. I mean, he's here on this. And it's the big corporations that are going to give him lots of financial contributions, not you. I mean, maybe you are personally, I don't know, but you get my point. So I think there's something we just don't get in this thing, why they're doing what they're doing. But they're making a lot of enemies of small business like you. You're the natural Republican constituency. If they get you angry, this is, they know this, but yet they still do it. I'm in a large element of loss on this one as well. It's not that I'm so smart. They know what they want to get done here. There's no question. McConnell's a very smart guy. We can talk afterwards more about it. You can see my frustration here. As an economist, I want to see tax reform to get investment and corporate spending up. We don't need tax cuts now for anybody. Oh, I think you're in the back first. I'll come back.
Okay, it's hard to follow up on that one, but
Go ahead.
Where you see with the capital investment with workers not, with companies not getting more productivity out of their workers, and now with the capital investment into automation.
Look, automation's fabulous. We need more. Bring it on. Look, the automation, we're not seeing it show up in the data, right? If it didn't, so what's going on? I don't know exactly, but my phone is here. So now I'm unemployed, right? So I sit home, I watch Netflix on my screen. I watch movies on my screen. I see my friends on the screen. I don't have to work. It's all free on the phone. Facebook, Amazon, Uber, have these improved our lives a little? Have they raised productivity? I don't think so. Uber's still driving a cab, right? At the end of the day, you're still driving a cab. What we need to see is robotics and artificial intelligence, robotics in healthcare, where labor productivity has been pathetic. We need it in construction, where it's been negative. We need it in transportation. These are areas that are crying for more robotics and raising productivity. Now, we also need to get our schools better, because we're going to need people to fix the robots and work on artificial intelligence, and we're going to create all these new jobs. And we need people to do it. We need people to finish high school and then get a vocation. Go to college, great. Don't go to college, get a vocation. Become a welder or whatever it is. You have to get a skill. High school diploma is a death warrant economically nowadays, right? Unless you're like Bill Gates or something, or Mark Zuckerberg. It's just not going to happen. But we need more robotics, because if we don't get productivity up, we're in real trouble, because our deficits are going to get bigger, we're going to get older, healthcare costs are going to skyrocket, Social Security is going to go up. We need something to give here, and robotics would be a wonderful solution, but with better education to match it. So I'm all in favor. Let's get rid of those jobs as fast as we can, in those sectors especially. But there's nothing. Sir, there was somebody here, yeah, then after we do.
It seemed like a lot of the economic statistics for this year are very similar to those years preceding the recession. I'm wondering, given where we are in our cycle now, what is the big thing that is telling you there won't be a recession next year or the year after?
Okay, there'll be a recession, I promise you that. I can promise you there'll be a recession. Sit back, relax, and enjoy when it comes. I read a quote this morning. Bernanke, in January of 2008, said they don't forecast a recession. We were already in one for 6 months. This is the best economist out there. They got whole buildings of economists that they got it wrong. So, little old me and all that. What we don't see now, what we saw back then, was now we see asset prices going up. Stocks, bonds, all these things are going up in price. That's a problem. But we don't see wages going up. We don't see commodities going up. We don't see agricultural coming up. We see China slowing, and they're the marginal buyer of almost everything. And they're slowing down their growth from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 to 5%. That's putting a lot of downward pressure on all kinds of commodities. That's a really important sign. Wage inflation is not out there. Overall inflationary pressures in Japan aren't there, in Europe aren't there, in Canada, there's no inflation anywhere. That gives us a lot of time to ramp up. Because when inflation starts to take off, the Fed starts to crank rates and then they drive us into recession. 60% of the time when the Fed starts to raise rates, they drive us into recession. They're raising slowly now because they don't want to do that. They're very afraid of a yield curve inversion and all kinds of stuff. So there's some things that certainly scream and say, we got a problem. Stock market, bond market, these are really frothy. But the stock market's kind of hard because you have to keep having very good corporate profits. But to have high profits and low interest rates, you have to take the profits away from the workers, essentially, because it's going to go either to capital or to labor. But if it keeps going to capital, labor gets unhappy. That's why Trump and Sanders are so popular. So my concern is that this is not a perpetual thing here. This could go badly a little bit. But wage inflation is low, overall inflation is low, commodity prices are low, agriculture prices are low. Those are really important signs that give me this feeling that we got a little while to go. 2 years, a year and a half, I don't know, but I don't see one in 18, unless it's geopolitical. That's often, nuclear war, or, Trump and North Korea, or Iran and Israel. I mean, there's things that can go wrong there. Outside that, I feel pretty good. There's someone over there, yeah. And then we'll go up there again.
Since 2010, I've been sort of having this theory that the only way out of the problem you're talking about in terms of deficit productivity is actually immigration. I don't see another way for us to grow as a country unless we ramp up our immigration, and that is not happening with politics.
There's two solutions. More people working and existing people working better.
Right.
So, getting daycare. If you want to work and you have a child, don't worry about it. We'll give you good daycare for low price. Just get your derriere into the workforce. Japan's trying that now, trying to get women into the labor force because they're exceptionally, it's difficult for women. They're profoundly hard, but they need, because their population is shrinking. So we need to do everything we can. Yes, immigration, economically, every economist on the planet will say immigrants are generally good. There's almost no literature out there, there's a little bit out there that says they're mildly negative, but 90% of the literature says they're unambiguously good. They spend money, they earn money, they pay taxes and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to be fussy and only pick higher educated people, okay. But let's have a rational policy here that you finish your PhD in mechanical engineering and we want you here. You're from China, we want you even more. Because we don't want you to go back to China. We want you to stay here and have your family move here and bring their money with them. Thank you very much. Right? This is. We want more trade because trade's good. Trade helps everybody. Right? It's unambiguously good. So there are things here about the Trump policies. Trump doesn't understand the economic influence of immigration, and he doesn't understand trade in the slightest. Trade deficits have nothing to do with trade. Nothing. It has to do with savings and investment imbalance. If you run an imbalance there, you invest too much, you don't save enough, you're going to run a trade deficit. That's just the way it is. So yeah, I'm with you here, but there's a whole political thing that's completely out of our realm of discussion here, right? That drives the vote on it.
Seems like you've covered everything except our national debt. Are you at all concerned about the condition of our national balance sheet and where it's going?
Okay, national debt's the question. And the answer is yes, I am. Right now, the total debt is about 100% of GDP. So our economy is like 19 trillion bucks or 18 or something like that. It's about the same. The public debt on which we pay interest is about 13 trillion bucks. The difference is Social Security trust funds and FICA, those things we owe money to ourselves. We owe the money, but we're not paying anybody interest on it. So every interest rate rise of 1% is $130 billion in servicing costs, 2/3 of 1% of GDP, a non-trivial amount. And as you saw on that slide, if we do nothing over the next 10 years, our deficit goes from 2.5% of GDP to 5%. GDP growth is, as long as GDP growth and the deficit are the same size, we're okay. So nominal GDP, I talk about real GDP growth here, but nominal GDP growth is about 3%, right? Because inflation is about 1%. So as long as the deficit's no higher than 3%, the debt to GDP ratio is the same, okay? But when it gets above 3% to 4 and 5, That's driving the debt to GDP ratio up from 100 to 101 to 102 to 102 to 104. And what the data unequivocally shows is as that number rises, GDP growth slows. Because you have to tax more to get the money. You may give it back to your own citizens, but those citizens are higher income citizens who get the interest on the bonds. Wealthier people spend less. As wealth gets more and more tightly held, it weakens GDP growth. So we're going to have higher interest costs, and the money won't be so evenly distributed, and we'll have to have higher taxes. If you look back in history, tax cuts tend to end up being followed by tax increases because we realize we got too much deficit problem. We have to compensate with a higher tax rates. So I'm nervous, and we have to have, getting back to you, higher productivity, more people, something to boost GDP, hopefully. But if not, we have to cut spending and cut services, right? We'll have no choice there because we can't have this 6% budget deficit GDP deficit to GDP ratios that we're going to have in 2027, 2028. We should all kill ourselves 6 months before we die and we'll save ourselves a lot of money. Okay. I'm a little macabre there. I think we're going to cut it there. I'll be outside answering questions until the last person